Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome back, my friends, to the second hour of the broadcast. We're going to be joined by Noam Chomsky coming up here just a couple minutes. He is an institute professor of linguistics and semantical syntax and philosophy of language at MIT in Massachusetts. And he's written books like Manufacturing Consent, an excellent video, also titled Manufacturing Consent. And it goes into how they stage things, how they will have a supposed debate on television, but the people debating are actually on the same side. They're just debating the exact implementation by just a few degrees, giving you the psychological illusion that there's really some type of difference, so that in your mind you're going to fall in supposedly either phony camp, being steered in the direction they wish. Now, that's how I put it. Chomsky does it in a little bit more sophisticated fashion, but they do this all the time. Just every level of propaganda you can imagine. He also gets into what the editors do with the newspaper articles, how television's controlled, and he comes to the same conclusion that we have, that it is a global elite controlling it and steering it and dumbing down the population and manipulating us with words. Words mean things. And this also fits into the whole moral relativism debate, because what does is mean with Bill Clinton? It's simply a way to neutralize any type of dissent. And it's working wonders upon the minds of the American people. It's like Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. Liberals, conservatives, you look at what they do at the top, they're all the same people. The political left has secret police that wear black uniforms and ski masks. The political right has police that wear black uniforms and ski masks around the world. Centralized government, and they tell you to be in the middle of that system. More semantical deceptions. Always corralling thoughts and ideas. Giving you phony decisions, phony choices. That, my friends, is the essence of modern mind control. Behavioral modification. And until you realize that the sitcoms and the cartoons have more propaganda in them than the newspaper or the nightly news, you will not even begin to scratch the surface of the level of this inculcation, this soaking into the propaganda state. Every facet, every level, deluged, infested. The human mind's like a computer. Garbage in, garbage out. And they're training us with phony meanings for words. They are conditioning us to believe in a false political paradigm and system. That's basically what it boils down to. And Noam Chomsky calls it manufacturing consent. The phony choice between the Republicans and the Democrats. This huge globalist corporate state that claims that it's capitalist. How is it capitalist to use huge government international bureaucracies to go after your competition, to take in massive sums of corporate welfare, and then to be able to twist the debate into a fight over, aren't we going to take care of the poor? And that really has nothing to do with it. That's semantical deception, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us is Professor Noam Chomsky from MIT. Professor, it's a real honor to have you on the show.
Glad to be with you.
You bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about the studies you've done and some of the books you've written, and what type of system we live in today in your analysis.
Well, I have two parallel and separate lives. One of them is what they pay me to do at MIT, that's linguistics. The others, what they would probably pay me not to do, that's being involved in a whole variety of social and political issues, international affairs, the international economy, the foreign policy problems. just about anything you can think of that's in the front pages of the newspapers. And one part of that, which has interested me for many years, is kind of analysis of ideological institutions that includes the intellectual culture, but specifically the media, which I've spent a lot of time on. So it's that collection of topics. What kind of system do we live in? That requires an essay.
That requires an essay. Well, I would call it almost a matrix-like system where 98% of people don't even know the real parameters of power that surround them, phony paradigms and systems of phony left, right, with all the roads leading towards a centralized, highly controlled corporate bureaucracy.
I agree with that, but I think the only thing I would add as a kind of a footnote is that marginalization of the public that you're describing is quite purposeful and conscious, self-conscious. So especially through the 20th, actually it goes back to the founding of the country, but it's particularly in the 20th century, there has been a very self-conscious, explicit effort. I mean, don't have to make it nothing speculative, because the leaders say so. Business leaders, intellectuals, academic, social scientists, and others say that it is important to keep the public out of things. It's important to ensure that the public remain what are called spectators, not participants. They're supposed to be directed to other concerns and not to interfere with policy formation. That is a major phenomenon developed in the more democratic countries, in the United States and England particularly, through the 20th century. And the reason was very clear. By the early 20th century, it was becoming very difficult to control people by other means. The voting franchise was extending. Labor unions were developing. Women were demanding the vote. I mean, it was the countries, especially England and the United States, were simply becoming more democratic. And it was recognized early on that if you can't control people by force or poverty or some other means, you are going to have to control them by what was quite openly called propaganda at the time. People don't like the term propaganda anymore, but that was used. I mean, that's where the U.S. public relations industry, it grows out of these experiences and this understanding, and it is very explicit.
So, Professor Chomsky, they put out their papers that I've read from the Carnegie Endowment and others, that mind control, behavioral modification is much cheaper and much more effective than tanks and guns.
And it's the only thing you can do, because in the more democratic countries, you can't control people with tanks and guns. I mean, maybe to some limited extent, but not very much. There's too much freedom. It was understood very well, and it is kind of striking that it's in the two main democratic countries, England and the United States. It was realized in parallel about the same time that you're going to have to control people by what was called regimenting the public mind, by ideological control. That's where the term manufacturing consent comes from.
Well, take Bush and Clinton. They have the exact same policies on land grabbing, selling out sovereignty, deindustrialization, drugging the children. But you ask the average person, they have this cult-like following of their parties and can't admit it's really the same, what I call the same, it's really two corporate management teams bidding for control of the CEO job of the New World Order.
Well, maybe I'm naive, but I have more faith in the public than that. My feeling is that the general public is rather well aware of this, and I think it shows up in there's a lot of public opinion study in the United States, mainly because business wants to keep its finger on the public pulse. They want to know what people are thinking. So we have a pretty trustworthy and very extensive polling industry. And what comes out of public attitudes, I think, is kind of revealing. So for the last 20 years or so, about 80% of the population, when they're asked, what do you think the country, who runs the government or what does it do, the answer that they pick out of a set of choices is the government works for the few and the special interests, not the people. And in fact, in the last election, just last November, there's a big project at Harvard University called the Vanishing Voter Project, where they study attitudes towards elections and so on. Right before the election, so this has nothing to do with shenanigans